I'll try to record this now further. Otherwise, I'll see. So the point in terms of recapitulation is we need the state, basically, as a legal instance to obtain of laws. Because, of course, we can negotiate a law, we can negotiate amongst each other what we do and what we accept, but there is no court that if one of us does not stick to these rules, and it's not just negotiated between us, there is no court we can go to, and you go there and said, but Peter said, and he didn't do. And then the court will say, well, sounds good, but what's your proof? Why is this, what is the legal basis for this negotiation? You are in class and it's not a private relationship. So this is outside of class relationship. You can't claim anything. And then it goes on, and you may have actually a document that states, and I signed it, some agreement, and then the court may say, yes, this is actually a contract. And this is a valid contract, and this is according to law so-and-so a valid contract. But we need this instance, and this instance is one of power, of legitimacy, because we accept this instance, maybe that we like to accept it, but maybe that we dislike it, but still we accept this and say, yes, if the state, if the court says so-and-so, we have to accept it. Because it has the power. Or because we voted for the government. Or because it is organizing our community. So you have the two aspects of legality according to the law, and legitimacy, if you want, according to the morals. And there come exactly with these standards. They are always turning up again and again. Two sides. What is legal is not necessarily legitimate, and what is legitimate is not necessarily according to the law. And then we have to find an agreement, a solution. This may be that we find it before we go to court, or it may be that we need to go to the court and say, listen, we don't find a solution. What do you say? And the court will decide according to the two rules. One is power. The other is simply the written law. And then you have with power something very interesting that will employ us later, that long-term history, this very long-term history, plays a role here. In Christian societies, you will have another acceptance than in non-Christian societies. In certain societies, it is the group, the collective, that is stronger, that is more meaningful than the individual. The young and the old. All this plays a role, and all this develops over a very, very long time. And this is why there are people sitting in Vienna, sitting in New York, or wherever, discussing human rights and coming to the conclusion, as I said, there's always a judge from the country concerned explaining what this means, what it means to lie. That this person couldn't do other. He had to lie because of the utility, because of saving life. Or this person had not been able to lie. Because the rule says never lie, always tell the truth. And this is different from country to country, from tradition to tradition. Now, it doesn't concern me, but don't eat, I don't know, pig's meat. I don't eat any meat. So, for vegetarians, it's simple. But what is the rule that I don't eat pig's meat, but I eat cow's meat, or I don't eat dog's meat? For me, it's very strange. If you eat meat, eat meat. It doesn't matter what it is. For others, it is a huge thing of eating certain kinds of meat, but not others. Religious reasons. And even we decided to distance ourselves from this religion, we still may continue with this tradition. What all this means as well with the state, actually, we have a legal subject, meaning we can go to court, we can claim rights. They are not granted because we are just looking nice or helpless or whatsoever. We can go to court, and one of the problems, if you want, is you have two different kinds of legal subjects. One is the individual. This is very clear. And there you have equality. You have the same right as I do and as she does. Not quite as the little child is. The little child. Up to 18, you said 18, there's a boy. There are different lines. Legal subject, this is the one, that's the individual. But we have another one, and this is a little bit, if you want, complicated. We have the state being a legal subject. We have institutions being a legal subject. Now you cannot go, or in rare exceptions, you cannot go to the president or to the CEO of an enterprise and say, listen, you built this kind of car, and there was something wrong, and you are personally responsible. You are representing BMW or I don't know what. But at the end, it is this one person representing as legal subject with others of this enterprise exactly this body.
So we had similar situation in different classes, in dispute resolution. We had similar situation in different classes. The class called dispute resolution, it's already finished. we had a situation where we talked about two sides in the court. One of them defendant, one of them is like the city itself. So when the defendant was driving a car in the city, he bumped into the road which was not fixed fully. It had a hole. But there was no sign. So it was the city's obligation to put signs. But the city says that they have put signs, but the society just threw it away, or some like bandits just took it away, or just young boys. So we are not going to take away the signs, put signs everywhere, but it's still their obligation. And in that case, they made it equal. But if you look by the law, city is not right. 100% is not right. It's obligation that there always has to be a sign beside the road that this road is not fixed, or there is a hole, or there's an unfixed border is not fixed. So there always has to be a sign. But in that class, teacher explained that it can be 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
But by the law, again, it goes on the law. The law says the city is responsible for that road. Whatever happens, if I go to take away the sign of someone else, the city have to always 24/7 keep on checking it.
Yep.
But they didn't, and that case was finished as 50-50. That's why I'm saying the law is not fully it's complicated.
Well, there are two dimensions to it. The one thing is the city is responsible for it. And I have to decide as judge or as solicitor, what does this responsibility mean? Because I cannot expect the city standing, let's say, every 25 meters, because it can be foggy, it can be a very bad sight, every 25 meters, standing there and making sure that there is a sign. It's
But nowadays
really
there
important.
there are cameras.
Okay, there are cameras. Still, can the city be so fast there, the sign is taken away, you see it on the camera, you have to rush there, and before you are there, you're arriving at something else.
You can prevent it at least. There is a chance. If you just say local road police.
I agree. Although you have this, there is always a little leeway. Maybe a large one, maybe a little one.
But they said But they said it happened several times before. It happened. In that case, it's also said it happened several times before. I'm bringing up this different subject because law is not full. They always defend their side.
Exactly. That's what I say.
Even if it's not fully correct, they still defend it.
Of course. That's why I say there are different opinions, there are different positions. You always try to make the best out of it for you. That's why I said the solicitor will, of course, say, yes, you have to stand there every couple of meters to make sure that there is a signage. The other dimension is, and the city is obliged to do the best they can. Let's say it this way. Then in the concrete case, it will be decided. The other point is, who is the city?
You mean by the exact person?
You have to bring the city in front of the court. Who is the city? Is it the Lord Mayor? Is it the head of the road building department? Is it the poor guy who is responsible for putting up the signs? At the end, you have a similar thing there. It's always the poor guy who is at the end of the chain.
But that's the point. The law always defends themselves, not the person that was accused, not the person that had the problem. Law is made for a person, not for the law itself.
Exactly, this is the problem.
That's a human right.
Excellent. That's exactly the problem we have in law. And I discussed it with many different people, and definitely better legal scientists, jurists than I am, who said exactly, we have difficulties, and this is the point I wanted to make with this conclusion. We have difficulties to decide actually, or to have social laws. We are always having laws that are dealing with individuals. You make the city of 9 million people, of 20 million people, or of 100 people, you make this an individual, a legal subject. Which is absurd, in a way. You always have different people there. And then, of course, you have an institutional system where you have different responsibilities. Can the Lord Mayor of a city of 20 million people, can this person know exactly what every person in the administration does? Simply not possible. So what you can do is, you have the rules, you rely on the rules, and then there is still a certain responsibility where you may rely too much on the rules.
That's why we have levels.
Exactly.
So that's how we can find out whose mistake was that.
And this is where we can find it out and where we have to find it out. We cannot rely simply on a formal regulation that encapsulates everything. And this is another problem of law. Law always has to deal with individual cases, because you are Muslim and you are disrespecting the rights of the woman, of your wife, one of the 20, or I don't know actually in Islam how it is, but you may have many women. You are disrespecting, but at the same time I cannot decide and make a law for you for this one case. I always make a law, state, for a certain type of action. And then again I am in trouble, because of course I make the rule, don't walk on the street, don't run on the street, in principle, but save child in principle. And this is with human rights. Where we have the special situation which is which one? Human rights law is in very broad terms how to be characterized.
What's the question?
How, in general, formal terms, how do you characterize human rights law?
Individual law.
Okay. How do you mean individual law?
Each individual's rights.
Hmm?
Each individual rights that make sense on their social status.
Okay, I am individual.
Yes.
You are individual.
Yes.
You have the right
To study.
to study.
And you have a right to teach.
I have the right to teach. I have the obligation to teach, but I say, I will teach, but not you.
Yeah, you'll teach the class.
No.
I mean, by the social sense, that's what I mean.
No, I will teach the class, but I want you to go.
Okay.
Because you have a beard. And a human being with beards is not real. So I would...
You pick out some individual.
I would disrespect your human right to education. I don't say I don't teach, because then I have this job, I accept this job, but I disrespect your human right. Can you go with this to the human right court?
Yes. I can. Because in this university it doesn't specify the dress code.
Ah.
For example, in my country we have a dress code. You cannot go there, not in company, just in the schools or universities or any work position, official government work position. So no beard, always a tie, white shirt. So we have a dress code. That's why we have a law, and that's why we have individual law. If you don't want to have beard, if you don't want to wear the dress code, if you want to wear casual, just go to work in another place. I mean, that's how it works in my country. And that's how it works in other countries also. Some schools have dress codes, some don't have it. So, but in our school here, we don't have dress code. It's casual. So, teacher can this school.
All of us have a dress
Here.
code. Oh, here no.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, here we don't have a dress code, so I can have it there. I can have a long hair if I want. I can dye my hair, and teacher has no right to set me out. So obviously, I can go to the court and prove myself right.
But what do you actually do now? You go to court. I say, you with your dyed beard, red and pink, and I don't know what, I don't want to teach you. I will teach, but not you. For this reason. So you say, my human rights is disrespected.
No, because you knew when you came to this university to teach, you're supposed to know what rules they have. Because each school has regulations. And you, by your own consciousness, you go and choose the work that is appropriate for you.
Okay.
So in this situation, specifically teacher is in a wrong situation.
Okay, but now you have to be very precise. Because you can bring me to court, but not to the Human Rights Court.
But not what?
Not to the Human Rights Court. You can bring me to the Civil Court, or others may apply, and say he did not follow.
I can bring it to the Human Rights Court as well.
No.
Why not? Because
you can bring the Irish state, the Chinese state to the Human Rights Court if it is the Chinese state who neglects, who employs me, who knows I will breach the law, but who still employs me and says, yeah, go ahead. And this is exactly the point with human rights law. It is regulating state behavior. It's not regulating individual behavior. So you can bring a state to the human rights law and says the state neglects, breaches the human rights law. And this breach is accepting me, knowing that I will breach the law. So
I cannot bring you. I can bring the office. That's what you mean, the administration that brought you.
not the office. That
I
And
mean,
that,
administration that is responsible for you.
that is exactly the problem we have when it comes to this kind of law. We have so many different levels. So you have to make sure that the office that employed me did so in this conflict, respecting my wrongdoing.
Doesn't matter, respecting or not, they brought the school law.
Well, they respect in this case that they don't say immediately you have to leave. So if they go on and you go to the office and you say, he didn't teach me, he threw me out of classroom, and they say, okay, you have to go.
Who have to go?
You have to go because...
No, then I can bring back to the corporate
Yeah,
office.
exactly. But this is exactly this hierarchy of who is at the end responsible. It is extremely difficult to make human rights cases, individual human rights cases, bringing them to court, because not everybody is legally in a position to say there is a breach of human rights.
But I can't say it because on the human rights, on the Constitution of University, we can say you're supposed to know that before coming
Exactly.
to work. That's why it's a one-to-one, like teacher and student conflict, not
Exactly.
student and office. It doesn't matter if the office knew that you will breach it. It's still between teacher and student. Teacher's fault.
Yeah, I agree. But it is in terms of law, you have a conflict between two people. That's the original position. We disagree on something. Now, on the one hand, I said it's individual law. We as individuals are entering or are in a certain relationship. I say A, you say B, and this is in conflict. Now, you said B, I said A, and we are, we are part of a university, both working in the university. I'm employed, you are working as a student.
Ah, okay. I thought like apart.
So, this university agrees with you. You are right. I am wrong. So the relationship changes. I am not in conflict with you anymore, but I am now in conflict with the university. Legally, it's a huge difference. Because now the university is taking your interests in board against me, or not.
But they have to take interest.
They have, in this case, they have to take.
In any case, they have to, because the rules, again, those rules of university, and the teacher coming to the school, he knows all of the rules. He is breaching, not the student, not the office. Office brought to you knowing that, but you breached it. It's still the problem of the teacher.
Up to a certain point, I agreed. And then I read a case of a woman who studied, I don't know where, I can pass it on to you. It's hugely interesting because it is so complicated. After reading this case, I said, okay, I have my opinion, but still I'm glad that I had not been the judge. It was a Turkish woman wearing the headscarf, studied in, I don't know where in France, studied in Austria, I think. Studied in a country where she had been allowed to wear the headscarf, and then moving at some stage to to Turkey, not being allowed to wear the headscarf.
In Turkey.
That was the pre-Erdogan era, Kemalist era, and she claimed the right to be admitted to university to study
In Turkey.
in Turkey with the headscarf. And Turkey said, no, we are Kemalist state, we are laicist principle. You're not allowed it. Legally hugely complicated.
I don't think it's complicated. She knows that in that country it's not allowed. Why does she go to apply to study there?
I'll give you the case. You have to read it. It is complicated.
And the Stanford else too. And there is Stanford.
In a way, it's my conflict as well. I would say as well, why do you come here? But at the same time, you have the rules where the court had to decide. It was the court, the European Court of Justice, I think. So you have the different instances. Now you have, on top of this, actually, you would have the Chinese state. And then on top of this,
International human rights.
hmm?
International human rights.
Exactly. And I have the freedom to work here according to my rules, question mark. And my rule says no people will be.
You have to pay first country.
Hmm?
You sign a contract.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter about international human rights.
Right. No, in this formulation, you say human rights are limited to a certain state.
I think it's in all states like this. All states have different regulations. So that's why it's called human, has its own brain, has its own level of thinking. And he consciously go and signs a contract, knowing that there can be international students having a merit or being different religions. So it's not about international human rights, it's again about the person specific.
Do you have others an opinion there? Should I teach you?
Oh.
Should I teach you?
No, I guess. Like, actually, I understand, but do we have the right to say someone what religion should he keep? Say that. It's not even it's not. What religion he have to believe? So we have no right to say which people should believe in like exactly a religion. If we don't have this kind of right, so we don't have to say to the person that you don't like to be his company. I don't know how to say that.
Any other opinions? Or support? it is this question that human rights law has to solve the problem, the conflict, and this is simply a fact, between a state not fulfilling the obligation that exists under human rights law. And this is a very complex law. It is not about me or individuals not complying with the human rights law. If I, as individual, or you or whosoever, does not comply with the human rights law, the institutional system is only interested, is only relevant if the state that is responsible in this case neglects the obligation to secure your right. And then, of course, you have the difficulty to decide who is the state. In concrete, who is responsible. It is not me breaching the human rights law, and this is a huge difficulty. Now, you can always bring me to the civil court and say, listen, you signed the contract with this university, and this university doesn't have a dress code, and so you enforce something, meaning the university is wrong to employ you or to employ you further. As soon as they know that you are breaching the law, just get out here, and not you. You have the right to stay. That's a kind of easy to solve problem. The difficulty is what happens when large enterprises are breaching human rights. And for different reasons, the state accepts this. Concrete example. I said I lived in Ireland. Altogether, it's, let's say, the European Union, not let's say Europe.
Let's say Great Britain. Great Britain.
That's it. It's Ireland, it's West France, Germany, and so on. Once upon a time, I don't know when it was, it's kind of a long time ago, I think in the 70s or something, there's another tiny state here which is called Switzerland. And in Switzerland there was an enterprise. There was a Havary, it was a pharmaceutical company. They polluted the entire area due to this accident. And Switzerland said, sorry, yes, no, just leave. Don't think you can open a business here again. This company was not happy about this. They had to find a new place. It is actually more or less really there, on the island, where they had been offered by the Irish government, come here and build. the legislation was a little bit problematic, let's say open, that it was not clear what kind of obligation does the company have in terms of environmental protection. Coming from Switzerland, having this offer, they said, well, thanks very much, great. But what's with environmental issues? There are certain emissions we have with this company, and it would be hugely expensive to build a company that does not have any risk that is environmentally friendly. The Irish government said, leave this with us. We'll sort this out. You come here, you build the company, we have, I don't know, I really don't know, let's say, just for the sake of saying something, 10,000 people getting into employment. And this was a time where Ireland was in a disaster, there was poverty, there were no employment opportunities. So they came. Actually, you have in this area, there have been other chemical, pharmaceutical industries as well. You have a high rate of cancer due to the environmental issues. What is what you do as an individual? You say, okay, cancer, I live 10 years without employment, I die tomorrow because I'm starving to death, well, not tomorrow, but next week. So just get them here. Better 10 years bad life than dying immediately. A little bit over the point, but this was a kind of choice. And the Irish government accepted this. Now others said, don't allow them to build here an enterprise plant that does not fulfill modern conditions. So the Irish government had been responsible for inviting an enterprise to do the business under conditions that would be at least problematic in terms of human rights, because you put the life of people in danger. Try to sort this out, go to the Human Rights Court. This would be a typical case where you have individuals in a way, you have an individual state, and this is the essential point. You cannot go to the company and say, but you did. You can go to the Irish government and say, you did not fulfill your obligation to do whatever you could do, could have done to protect the life of Irish citizens. You as Irish state individual, right, you are responsible for the life of your citizens, individuals. With the Human Rights Court, you can say they are in a way dealing with individuals, but they are aggregating them, and they are saying we are not fighting your personal issue with the Irish state or with the Novartis, but we are fighting the matter of the state against the citizens. This was the ought to be one, because it never happened. It never happened. The ought to be one would be, this should not be. That for the short-term interest of getting employment, you risk the people you risk the health of the people. It should not happen, ought not to happen. So there was no case, there had been political movements against it, but it never turned out really to be fought through. Why? What is the reasoning behind this? Go back to history. Why or when did this discussion on human rights was getting serious? Not the general, very general, treat everybody well, but in terms of the concrete discussion, concreter discussion on human rights. Enlightenment, as a political movement, as a civil movement, and an economic movement. By and large, in a nutshell, the bourgeoisie standing up against the feudal system and saying, we have rights against you. You do not own us in any way. It was not slavery, but it was another form of ownership. And we reject accepting this kind of ownership. So in very general terms, as I said, you always have had some discussions on human rights, on good life, on how to treat people, to be just to each other. But now you have had something more specific. Does anybody have an association when it comes to the French Revolution? So there had been something on fraternity, on brotherhood. You mentioned before, there had been something on equality. People saw themselves as born equal, not born intelligent or rich or I don't know what, different. And they had been born free. Having their own mind, having their own brain, being able to decide, being able to think, and being able to think for themselves and for others. Never lie. You may think for yourself, I lie, but as you think for others, you don't lie. Or you think for others because the utility, the benefit of something is for all of us larger. The French Revolution was kind of outstanding historically for whatever reason, but this was a movement of the time when you have had in many countries this kind of revolution. Now let's make a little test. These had been the three items. Which is the most important? The most important is? Here, you start. Most important?
Quality.
Equality. Equality. What's your point? Which one is the most important? You make a revolution by one of these. What is most important? What do you want? Liberty? Who said liberty?
No, I said equality and liberty, and I chose equality, but most people, I think, will choose liberty.
What do you want? Liberty? Fraternity?
现在翻译。
You have to know this. You have to
翻译
decide.
一下，翻译一下，多翻译，然后就。
Fraternity?
翻译三个字，然后 choose one 一个。你说的是 what?
Which one?
He's just translating this.
Fraternity.
He's translating that.
Fraternity? You have to choose.
这个是大个，这个是。
One. One you can choose one. What is the most important? The others can think already. So what is the most important? Why do you go on the streets? One reason. Somebody else wants first. You have to do it. At some stage, everybody has to choose. Equality? Equality? True. What?
Liberty.
Liberty.
Isn't it
Liberty? Next one. Fraternity, equality 2, liberty 1. Liberty? Liberty 2, head and head. Go ahead. Equality? Equality.
Yes.
Equality 3. Next one. Liberty. Liberty? Liberty? Next. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. So there are not many missing anymore. Who wants? No, you said already, right? Yeah. Who is that? Your choice. What's your? For what do you know? For what is the revolution? What is the most important? So in a way I said it implicitly at least. It was bourgeois revolution. It was a new class, economic class, being interested in their own economic interests. And the most important in this feudal society was liberty. They wanted to be able to be free to make their own business. As simple as that. They did not want the dependency from the feudal class. They did not accept this anymore. They had been ready to pay taxes, but they had not been ready to give, it was usually a tenth from their work, being dependent on the feudal, on the aristocrats. And then it had been, only then, equality. Because of course everybody should have the same opportunities to make business. There was enough business to be done. Why should I say I only want to be free to make my own business, but you should not? You should be limited. Everybody should be able to make business, equality, liberty, equality, and then we have something for the poor, so to say. We have fraternity. We are one society, we are in the same boat, if you want, and we are together standing up against this aristocratic society. And as I said, all this reflects in different ways these two strengths, the political institutional system. You needed a state that guaranteed liberty and equality. I've never been there, but I only know this is this kind of White House in the United States where you have the government. It's the kind of the physical representation of the government. They are sitting there, and then you have, of course, this huge body with it. And then you have the administrations and all this. This is the state, and then you have the civil society, the people engaging for it, including people helping each other, including people who are then actually doing the business. This was all important in terms of this new setting of a new society. And of course you have had at the same time those who worked as workers. But it was not this fabric work as we know it then from later. And you can go through the entire discussion that then later led to the human rights discussion, to the institutional system. You have kind of trinities, always a set of three, like here. 3 and 3. And then you have had this individual as well. The individual being me, and you, and you, and you, but as well being part of a group, of this kind of communities, of social settings, of a university, And you have this institutional system of a state. There's a hierarchy, and nevertheless, hierarchy does not mean only top down, but it means as well that, of course, you have these points with what we have had before. Power and legitimacy. You cannot have pure power as violence if you do not have any legitimacy. And you do not have legitimacy if you do not have any power. So this matters in terms of, it's all about the individual, methodological individualism, I said at some stage, and it is all about the different ways of inclusion into society. And the society means the community, it means the municipality, it means the state, and it means increasingly this global something of which we do not know exactly what it is. And another point linked to it is that every level basically has its own sovereignty. They can act on their own behalf, and they have to. As an individual, I am responsible for myself. As municipality, as community, as students or university people, we are responsible for ourselves in this framework. And then we are responsible in the larger state, and we are responsible in the global arena. There's always a kind of conflict with this, and there is always this conflict as well with it between the ought to be, should be, but is not compulsory, and this is how far I can go. Where it is getting fundamental is another question that we have to think about as well. What is really important? Of course, we can say pure life is something important. But then we can say as well, to live, but under conditions that are unbearable, is of limited quality. If my health is under threat, under permanent threat, this doesn't really help me. To whom do I go? To the enterprise, to the CEOs, to the trade unions, kind of part of civil society, or to a court that suggests there is some neutral body that has laws and that follows the laws. And then I come back to this point, which we will come back frequently. Law. You mentioned the case there with the traffic signs, is all as the law, the core of the law is positive law. It is written down. It's a code of conduct, if you want, obliging different parties code of conduct. This is written down. This is how it ought to be in reality. not in religion, with religious ideas or philosophical ideas or, I don't know, dreams, but this is under today's conditions, it is historically relevant. Under today's conditions, this is what it should be. There are tiny things where you can experience, in a way, this importance of something, of history. Today you have streets for cars. 1900 something, streets had been there for people. There was the odd car coming. You could hear it already 2 miles away, something very noisy. And then the next car was coming 5 hours later. Stand here in the middle of the night on the street, and you will have more traffic within 1 hour or half an hour than you have had there over the entire day. So public spaces changed. So you need different laws. These cars couldn't even drive 50 miles per hour. Today, driving 50 kilometers or 50 miles, you think you are standing. So you have to adapt to this. And it is a written code of conduct. This is what counts. And it is the word that counts, the written word, which is written not by an individual, but by an institution. The actual person who wrote it cannot say afterwards, but actually I didn't mean it this way. I meant something else. This is written down and fixed what exactly it means. And fixed what exactly it means, it contains a command. And a command is not the ought to be, but the command is, this is what you have to do. This is not, actually I should not lie, but this says exactly you are not allowed to lie. Bad luck if there are other conditions and you feel forced to lie. There is another code of conduct that actually says, save the life of your friend. And in the one case, and this is left to the judge will decide, okay, it had been okay to lie, or the judge will say, no, this was outright a lie, and you should not have done it because there had been alternative ways of saving the life of your friend. But it is written down, and it is written down as code of conduct without moral statements, without this commitment. There are very few exceptions, actually, that it has a moral commitment, an explicit moral rule that is relevant, that is seen as relevant. And one of these exceptions is the canon law, the law that is valid for the Catholic Church. The other is, and in quantitative terms it's more important, it is the Sharia, which is a religious law? Well, it is a law, in a way it's a secular law, but that follows the rules of a church. And I say it's a secular law because it is a law that is valid for everybody in this constituency. It is not for the believers only, but it is a state law, and in this state I have to follow this law. Now the Catholic Church, Catholic state is small enough, that's only in Rome, the Vatican, and some outliers where it's still as well valid. And then you have something very important as well, and this makes the conflict. I'm not sure if it's Y or the I. It's the binary code. It's like a computer. This is why it's actually so interesting to see many advocates now being replaced by a computer. It's a binary code, means you are right or you are wrong. You follow the law or you don't. There is not a little bit. The law says, strictly speaking, you are right, you follow the rules of the law, you follow this code of conduct, you follow the command, or you are wrong, you do not. There is not a little bit following it. It's always this binary code where the judge actually says yes or no, guilty or not. The cases where you are a little bit guilty, or to some extent guilty, are at the end of the day broken down to guilty or not. At the end of the day, I say, because you have this hierarchy of laws as well, human rights law is a very general law. Can talk about the law, will talk about the law character later, but it's a very general issue. And it is, of course, on the one hand, more important than a local law, a law in the municipality, regulating the traffic under certain weather conditions in this and that area. Bylaws or something like this. More important, the highest in the hierarchy, at the same time hugely irrelevant because you don't know what to do with it. It's this kind, yes, a good society, behave well, be just, but what does it mean in this concrete case? So this is what you have to sort out. A hierarchy of laws, code of conduct, valid only if it is written, a command, this is what you have to do in terms of binary code, and then you have the same principle in all law. You can say it is in contract law, it is in trade law, and it is in human rights law, where the very same principles are applied and are valid. So this is it for today. We'll move a little bit into technicalities next time, but at the same time I want you, again saying this, watch the film, think what is important, write down 5 points where you think this is really important for me as a point from this film. Enjoy the evening, and we'll see you on Thursday.